Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. So continuing with readings from Stillness Flowing. We're on Chapter 6, the Heart of the Matter, Meditation Teachings. Continuing in Section 2, Thorns and Prickles, Sloth and Torpor. The third of the 5 hindrances, sloth and torpor, occurs most rarely in a mind habituated to a high level of stimulation. In such cases, focusing on a single unexciting object like the breath tends to induce feelings of boredom followed by dullness, and can lead to meditators losing their awareness altogether, sitting with head bobbing up and down, or slumped on their chest. This hindrance also afflicts meditators who indulge in the relaxed feelings that occur with the elimination of coarse mental agitation. In its more subtle forms, the hindrance can manifest as a state of mind that is calm but stiff and unwieldy. On one occasion, the Buddha compared the mind overcome with sloth and torpor to a prisoner in a dark and stuffy dungeon, and, at another time, likened it to fresh water choked by water plants. For monastics at Wat Pah Pong, the simple and repetitive way of life, free of most of the grosser kinds of sensual stimulation, reduced the likelihood that their minds would react against the discipline required in formal meditation. Luang Por's regular reminders to sustain mindfulness and sense restraint in all postures were thus aimed at reducing the gap between the meditator's awareness in periods of formal meditation and daily life. Monks were encouraged to observe factors that increased or decreased their tendency towards laziness and mental dullness. Food intake was one obvious variable. Quote, "If you find yourself sleepy every day, try to eat less. Examine yourself. As soon as 5 more spoonfuls will make you full, stop. Then take water until just properly full. Go and sit. Watch your sleepiness and hunger. You must learn to balance your eating. As your practice goes on, you will feel naturally more energetic and eat less, but you must adjust yourself." Luang Por gave many exhortations aimed at inspiring in his disciples the wholesome desire to strive for freedom from defilement and to realize inner liberation. It was bearing this wholesome desire, Dhammachanda, in mind that played the largest role in guarding against the hindrance of sloth and torpor. Without cultivating this strong aspiration to penetrate the Four Noble Truths, meditators going through periods of emotional turmoil or strong defilement could find their minds retreating into dullness during meditations as a means of anesthetizing their mental pain. The weekly all-night sittings were opportunities for monks at Wat Pah Pong to come face to face with drowsiness and to be given no choice but to seek for skillful means to overcome it. Emerging from a period of drowsiness after a steady refusal to give in to it could be an empowering and even rapturous experience. The patience accumulated by a regular practice of working with drowsiness was not an immediately obvious benefit, but many monks would acknowledge that over a period of months and years, it became increasingly evident. Nevertheless, whenever monks were pushing themselves physically, during monastery work projects, for example, and particularly in periods of hot and humid weather, sloth and torpor could still be a major obstacle. Luang Por gave a number of practical tips. There are many ways to overcome sleepiness. If you are sitting in the dark, move to a lighted place. Open your eyes, get up and wash your face or take a shower. If you are sleepy, change postures, walk a lot, walk backwards. The fear of running into things will keep you awake. If this fails, stand still. Clear the mind and imagine it is full daylight, or sit on the edge of a high cliff or deep well. You won't dare sleep. If nothing works, then just go to sleep. Lay down carefully and try to be aware until the moment you fall asleep. Then as you awaken, get right up. Don't look at the clock or roll over. Start practicing mindfulness from the moment you wake up. Continuity of practice was essential. If meditators allowed sloth and torpor in its guise as laziness or reluctance to hold them back, they were lost. They had to develop a consistent effort, impervious to passing moods. Quote, when you feel diligent, practice. When you feel lazy, practice. Agitation and worry. The fourth hindrance consists of two kinds of mental noise. Firstly, agitation, a busy restlessness of mind, and secondly, worry or guilty thoughts about the past. Only when the mind is asked to sustain attention on an object is the full extent of its habitual unrest revealed. The mad pinballing of the mind that ensues is the first great frustration experienced by the new meditator. As with other hindrances, the default remedy is to patiently bring the mind back to the object again and again until the mind is tamed. But when the mind is agitated, trying to restrain it can be a tiring and thankless task. Lungpo would caution meditators to be wary of falling into the trap of vibhava tanha, the craving to get rid of something. Rather than providing the impetus to free the mind from this hindrance, this kind of craving only made matters worse. A confused meditator asked him, "So when it darts about, I should just keep watching it?" Answer: when it darts about, it's right there. You don't follow it, but you're aware of it. Where could it go? It's in the cage. It can't go anywhere. Your problem is that you don't want anything going on in your mind. Lungpo Moon called that vacant state tree stump samadhi. If your mind is darting around, know that it's doing that. If it's motionless, then know that. What more do you need? Just have the measure of both movement and stillness. If today the mind is peaceful, then see it as a foundation for wisdom. But people like the peace. It makes them happy. They say, "Today I had a wonderful sitting, so peaceful." There, if you think like that, then the next day it will be hopeless. Your mind will be a jumble. And then it's, "Oh, today my sitting was terrible." Ultimately, good and bad have the same value. Good things are impermanent, bad things are impermanent. Why give them so much significance? If the mind is agitated, then look at that. If it's peaceful, then look at that. In this way, you allow wisdom to arise. Agitation is a natural expression of the mind. Just don't get caught up with it. A monkey doesn't keep still, does it? Suppose you see a monkey and start to feel uncomfortable because it won't keep still. You begin to wonder when it will ever stop moving around. You want to make it still so that you can feel at ease. But that's the way monkeys are. A Bangkok monkey, an Ubon monkey, monkeys are the same everywhere. It's a monkey's nature to move about, and realizing that is the end of the problem. If you're going to keep suffering all the time because the monkey doesn't keep still, you're on your way to an early grave. You'll be even more of a monkey than a monkey is. Doubt and indecision. The last of the hindrances, skeptical doubt, is the most insidious and crippling member of the group. It is characterized by vacillation, by the hesitation to follow through on a commitment. The hindrance occurs when meditators possess sufficient information about the teachings or the technique to take them through the initial stages of practice, but they become paralyzed by a need to be sure of the effectiveness of the method, or the teacher, or the teachings, or their own capacity to progress before making the effort and renunciation necessary to verify it. Not all doubt is a hindrance to meditation practice. On the contrary, some doubts are taken to be signs of intelligence. Speaking to the Kalamas, the Buddha said, "It is good. You are doubting about things worthy of doubt. The doubts of those who recognize that they lack the necessary information or the clear criteria to make a good choice are not considered to be defilements of the mind. The hindrance is born from a craving for guarantees that cannot be provided." The Buddha's simile to illustrate this hindrance is of a traveler lost in a desolate place, whose fear of the possible dangers on the path to safety outweigh his desire to reach that safety. In the early days of Wat Pah Pong, the majority of the monastics and lay supporters received only the rudiments of formal education and had strong confidence in Luang Por. They were not given to much pondering over the teachings. Their main doubts would center on whether or not they wanted to remain as monks. In later years, with more people coming from the city coming to the monastery and growing number of Western disciples, overthinking became more of an issue in the monastery. Doubts about the teacher, the teaching, the student's ability to practice the teacher's teaching multiplied. Luang Por's response to the chronic doubters was always to point out, quote, "Doubting never stops because of someone else's words. Doubts come to an end through your own actions." Placing unquestioning trust in the words of an authority figure can suppress doubts on one level, but it is a strategy that can never achieve a lasting security from them. Luang Por taught that the only way to go beyond doubts was through insight into their nature as impermanent, conditioned mental states. On one occasion, he explained why he didn't conduct daily interviews with the monks, as is the practice in many meditation centers. Quote, "If I answer your every little question, you will never understand the process of doubt in your own mind. It is essential that you learn to examine yourself, to interview yourself, listen carefully to the Dhamma talk every few days, and then use the teaching to compare with your own practice. Is it the same? Is it different? Why do you have doubts? Who is it that doubts? Only through self-examination will you understand. If you doubt everything, then you'll become totally miserable. You'll be off your food and unable to sleep, spending your whole time chasing after this view and that. What you must bear in mind is that your mind is a liar. Mental states are just that way. They don't last. Don't run around with them. Just know them with equanimity. As one doubt passes away and a new one arises in its place, be aware of that for what it is as well. Then you'll be at ease. If you rush about after your doubts, then not only will you be unhappy, but the doubts will increase." On reaching a certain point in their practice, some meditators would begin to wonder about the identity of the states they were experiencing while they were meditating. Luang Por would say they weren't on a highway, there were no signposts in the mind. On another occasion, he said it did not really matter if you were ignorant of the name of a fruit as long as you were aware of its sweetness and fragrance. Quote, "Meditation is the same. It's not necessary to know what things are called. If you know the name of the fruit, that doesn't make it any sweeter. So be aware of the relevant causal conditions of that state. But if you don't know the name, it doesn't matter. You know the flavor. If someone tells you the name, then take note of it, but if they don't, there's no need to get upset." Luang Por once reassured a Western disciple, quote, "Doubting is natural. Everyone starts out with doubts. You can learn a great deal from them. What is important is that you don't identify with your doubts. That is, don't get caught up in them. This will spin your mind in endless circles. Instead, watch the whole process of doubting, of wondering. See who it is that doubts. See how doubts come and go. Then you will no longer be victimized by your doubts. You will step outside of them, and your mind will be quiet. You can see how all things come and go. Just let go of what you are attached to. Let go of your doubts and simply watch. This is how to end doubting." Yeah, stop there.
We have comments or questions? it just occurs to me that, the hindrances are essentially what we're working with most of the time in our meditation practice in one way or another, unless the mind has really settled clearly into, clarity and energy and calmness. So really working and identifying and getting to know the quality of the mind that's obstructing, the bright ease of mind that can come with settling and collecting. And I think Ajahn Chah has pointed out in the readings and on many other places too, half the battle is actually just knowing the state of mind that's present and identifying it. And then, if need be, applying some antidotes, but oftentimes just bringing clarity and attention will help to dispel the hindrance itself. Just thinking, listening to that last one on doubt too, a thought that occurred to me is that in addition to the antidotes that Ajahn Thitapanno was reading from Luang Por, that I was just recently reading another way of reflecting on when there's doubt in the mind to help dispel it. Is just that an antidote is, in addition to what was said there, also just reflecting, asking oneself the question, do I know the difference between unwholesome and wholesome states of mind, and how to, in which ones to direct my mind towards developing and which ones to direct my mind towards abandoning. And just knowing, with, a fair amount of clarity, what is an unwholesome state and what's a wholesome state. Even if you haven't let go of all of the unwholesome ones or developed all of the wholesome ones, but knowing what those states of mind are and directing the mind towards skillful means, either letting go or developing as in right effort, but just knowing what is wholesome and what is unwholesome, it can be a really strong antidote to the doubting mind.
Yeah, it's also in the three fetters let go of extreme entry, Sakaya Ditti, Silabhata Paramasa, and Vichikicha, which is doubt. It's really interesting because it says he is free of doubt. He no longer has doubts about what is a wholesome or an unwholesome state. Mm-hmm. I think that's a really interesting, that's the doubt that's let go of extreme entry.
Mm-hmm. All the commentary that one can give to oneself of, am I doing the right thing? Am I, making progress fast enough? Am I, measuring up to the standards, of the Krupa Ajahns, and all of those kinds of things that are indicative of doubt. I'm coming back to, do I know what wholesome states are? Do I know what unwholesome states? What does this feel like? This feels like kind of an unwholesome state. There it is.
I'm pretty miserable. It must be an unwholesome state.
No more doubt.
I have no doubt that this is making me miserable.
How do the Ajahns distinguish between the hindrance of doubt and the fetter of doubt? The fetter that's abandoned versus the hindrance, is there a distinction to be made?
Well, sometimes you see a distinction around the fetter being, like doubting the teaching, doubting the path. Maybe the Buddhist path isn't the right one, but, it's kind of a fine distinction in my mind anyway. Hindrance just basically referring more to this present moment obstruction that's, leading to agitation or unclarity, wavering, particularly, when one is reflecting or meditating or things like that. And the fetter is just a broader category of the same thing, just like that's not only is it a hindrance in the moment, but it's a fetter to realizing, a surety in the path.
And just my opinion, but I think the hindrance would probably not plague you anymore if the fetter had fallen away. It's the same word. It's vicikiccha for the hindrance and for the fetter. So, but you're still plagued by things like kamachanda, like sensual desire, after stream entry. But I would think that fifth hindrance is probably at least mostly done away with.
Yeah. There's no question that the other remaining fetters are fetters and need to be abandoned, and that the path, that the Buddha set out is the way to do it.
I was just thinking, there's a teaching in the suttas somewhere where it's, and I can't quite remember it, maybe somebody else can help me out, but it's like, the Buddha's talking about like I think the word is like nourishment or food for the hindrances, and it's like for the five of them, there's like something that one is, attending to, the condition that conditions the hindrances, basically like the conditions for the five hindrances. And that seems like that's a useful kind of thing, but I can't remember them. And I'm specifically thinking in this case, like what it would be for doubt, I think for the kamachanda or whatever, for the sensual desire, the condition is like attending to the sign of the beautiful or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But for doubt, for the fifth one, if anybody knows, that would be interesting. I can't remember right yet.
That's like there's the whole section and nourishment for the five hindrances and the seven factors, and they play against each other, and how to start them and how to nourish them.
Exactly.
Yeah, going back and forth in the Sangha to somewhere, kind of Sangha to
Yeah, it's the one. The nourishment for doubt is unwise attention to things that are the basis for doubt. So even
as Ajahn Jeff, who is the master of certainty on many things, points out, and says there are a couple of these nourishments that just are kind of like confusing the way that they're worded, and
actually, I find that one actually quite clear. There are lots of things that are the basis for doubt, and if you attend inappropriately to them, you will doubt.
But for the mind that wants to know, well, what are those things?
Yes, what are them? It's probably what you're thinking right now.
But it's an interesting thing because it points to the process rather than the context. So it's like if you're attending to something and it's bringing up doubt.
Right, that's probably.
There you go.
Then it's just what Luang Por Chah was saying in the reading, like attending to it more, getting lost in it, and it just increases your doubts.
Right.
But the starting of that hindrance, the basis for starting that hindrance, I think that's where I recently read it, was that knowing what is wholesome and unwholesome.
Mm-hmm. Right. So Ajahn Thitapanno mentioned like incorrect attention. That's probably ayoniso manasikara.
Yes.
And I was just thinking, if that's the case, then there's sections, in some of the suttas where it talks about what exactly is, unwise attention, ayoniso manasikara. And it's like attending to what am I, where have I come from, what is this, sort of thinking about like this self basically and identifying the self and those sort of. There's a whole kind of section on that, and so there's probably some connection there.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's the whole Sabbasava Sutta.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that whole, not just that section, the one on seeing, tends to be abandoned by seeing, which is the one we were just referring to,
Right.
unwise attention.
Right.
But throughout all of those different ways that one gets into unwise attention or can nurture wise attention.
Because that ayoniso manasikara, it feeds doubt, but it also feeds delusion. So it's like, who was I in the past? How was I in the past? Having been what in the past? What did I become in the past? Who am I now? What am I now? How am I now? What do people think of me now? Having been what now? What will I become in the future? It's this. He attends unwisely in that way.
And develops a thicket of views, a wilderness of views.
But that's, I mean, if I look at my own meditation, that's most of what it is. Most of the thinking process is like, you know, oh no, I did that in the past, I did this in the past, I was like this in the past, I was like that in the past, people, you know, whatever. And, or this other person's like this other person's like that. And it's the same thing. If it's, usually it's to ourselves, but if it's to others, it's the same thing. It's the same process.
It really strikes me like that's why what you said, Ajahn, was so profound around he knows a wholesome mind state and an unwholesome mind state as such, because there's that other sutta where it says like by and large the world falls into biases of existence or non-existence, and it goes on and then it says one who sees this sees that mere stress when arising is arising and mere stress when ceasing is ceasing, and in this his knowledge is independent of others. And it strikes me that that would be the way to undercut all the doubts, is just, because that's all we can know, is whether the mind state is wholesome or not. And I guess if you'd abandoned, like, if you knew that, then that would make sense why the attachment to rites and rituals went as well, because none of that external stuff would matter as much if you knew what the mind state was below it all, maybe. It seems to make sense to me.
Yeah, I was bringing back to presence or absence of dukkha as an indication. Sometimes it gets a little bit confusing if you're, just because we can still get caught in attending to things that we think are, are not dukkha, when they actually are. They're just kind of a more pleasurable state of mind. Sometimes we confuse sukha with non-suffering, but if it's a worldly kind of sukha, then we can get kind of wrapped up into that. So it's good to know that some sorts of pleasant feeling still lead to dukkha, but yeah, basically that deepening understanding of what is really unwholesome based on one's own experience, but with reflecting on the guidance from the teachings as well. It's the way to develop that real deep sense of when dukkha is arising.
In Forest Path, Ajahn Thitapanno has either it's an essay or a talk about Rinpoche and his teachings on doubt, and he breaks doubt into essentially two kinds. One being just the essential not knowing, just the minare of existence, and the other one being indecision. And I found that to be obviously the first one, just coming to terms with that, working on coming to terms with that. And the second one being working with indecision, I found an extremely helpful way of working with doubt, because so much of doubt was always like wanting to know, wanting to clarify, wanting to know. And yet I found sometimes when I just made a decision, it was like this roundabout way of cutting through so much of the doubt through a method that I wasn't even, or an objective that I wasn't even trying to get to. Through, Ajahn Thitapanno would talk a lot about, when I was up there, clarifying one's intention, which I think is similar in a way to what you're saying about clarifying one's mental state. What am I trying to do again? What am I after? And yeah, I've just found those two methods very useful, clarifying my intention, also clarifying the type of doubt that I'm working with, and just making a decision in some, whether it's like, be a monk, don't be a monk, or stay in the cloister, go up the hill, or, you know what I mean? Like the most minute, what should I do right now during meditation? So it's interesting because I haven't heard Rinpoche talk about that too much in any of his talks. There's obviously, Ajahn Thitapanno quotes him in that passage, but it's something I found quite useful.
Because, just reflecting on what you're saying, indecision is kind of a more overt manifestation of that doubt. And sometimes that might be easier to see, as it's actually the doubt is manifesting in terms of the lack of action, and then to be able to kind of cut through from that and back to the doubt just by making a decision and acting on it.
Yeah.
And then learning whether it was skillful or not.
Totally. And sometimes like making a decision, like what should I do? And then right after making the decision, being like, okay, actually not that, the other one.
Yeah.
You know, but it clarified it, like it sort of cleared up the doubt, you know. It's interesting. I know with my own experience with that, so much of it, and not all of it, is the essential question of what should I do? You know? I remember seeing some sort of image of doubt. It was like a heart with two hands going out in either direction. It's just torturous. Yeah.
It's a doubt seems it's getting kind of maybe too much of a bad name. I think it's a useful thing to have, mostly in the mundane realm, right? I mean, a doubt can come up about something that's based. It can be based on experience. Someone's telling you something. It's like, well, I'm not certain about that. It's cautionary.
That's kind of like a different manifestation that could be. It's like what the Buddha said to the Kalamas. You know, yes, you should be doubtful. You have reason to doubt that which should be doubted. You know, when they were referring to the teachings of the other sects. So I'm not sure that that's not the hindrance or the fetter of doubt. That's sort of like a healthy. You know, let's look at all sides of this and consider so that we can make sure that, you know, we're getting as close to the proper decision as possible. But it's the wavering or the incapacitation of the mind that can come sometimes with that questioning. That's more the hindrance. You know, it's that kind of underneath tone of, you know, that just keeps on feeding the questioning cycle rather than allowing the questioning to come to any logical conclusion.
Yeah, it seems though that, I don't know what the situation would be, but kind of jumping in too soon may not be as skillful, just the seeing doubt. It's like, well, I'm just going forward without maybe, I feel like,
I would guess it would be depending on the magnitude of the action. Should I kill this person or should I not kill this person? I'm just going to go ahead and do it. You know, obviously that
feels right.
Obviously that would be not such a skillful way to overcome doubt. but I can understand Tenpei's point. Sometimes you just need to do something, at least if you can reflect that the consequences wouldn't be catastrophic.
Yeah, I think specifically with murder.
Yes. that was what you were thinking. But then there is, the corollary to that I was thinking of when we were talking Tenpei Slows is also that sometimes it's just not going to be clear, and you're not going to know, and you don't know no matter, there is not any clarity about which way to go, and or if you're seeing clearly or not clearly. And then sometimes it's really useful, I find, to reflect with, okay, well the truth is that I don't know. And that in itself is a truth and a knowing. It's knowing that you don't know. And that's okay. And that kind of gives yourself space to, act in a way that will be skillful later on, but it dispels that underlying kind of agitation of like, I have to do something. Well, the truth is that I don't know, and I don't have to do something, And to realize that that's also a decision, deciding not to act is a decision, to act in some way. So.
I wondered too, I haven't read the passage in quite a while that Tenpei was referring to, but maybe that's what kind of like what Luang Por Chah was talking about in terms of like one doubt being just a simple sort of uncertainty in terms of like, the conditioned world and the complexity of it and so forth, and then indecision. And specifically we can even say like indecision with regards to, the wholesome and the unwholesome. Because even though there's all these shifting, crazy conditions out in the world, and we're not sure whether or not we want to kill this person, I'm kidding. But like the choice between the wholesome and the unwholesome action, I think pretty much everything you need to know about that's already in your own mind. In terms of like I'm just thinking back to the Savasana Sutta around, the one kind of seeing which leads to this proliferation of questioning around identity and past and future and all these things. I mean, those things are so complicated and largely irrelevant. And then the wholesome kind of seeing, the one, is with the Four Noble Truths. And like you were saying, like whether or not there is dukkha or isn't dukkha in my state right now, or sort of in the decision that I'm going to make, that's the relevant information for the decision that I need to make right now in terms of putting, my input intention into the and basically making a choice between anger and non-anger or whatever. Anyways, yeah, I think it'd be interesting. I'd like to read that passage again that Rinpoche was referring to, because it sounds like he's referring exactly to that, to making that distinction between like healthy doubt and unhealthy doubt.
I think if I remember correctly, it was between indecision and the first type of doubt was the sort of the minor, from like the talk, like the standing of the noble ones, like what I guess in Zen they would call it the great doubt, like the true doubt, like the honest doubt about conditioned experience, that we don't know what's happening. We don't know what anything is. We have a bunch of words for things, but at the end of the day, either for Zen practitioners that don't know mind, or for Lompa Cha if they're not sure mind, and making a very clear distinction between that. Like the first one is absolutely not a fetter. It's the truth. It's the So it's my recollection.
I'm just reflecting on my own experience when I've been really plagued with doubt and I wasn't able to make a decision. It's because I was approaching it from like thinking like, what do I want? And that's when I've really been stuck. But like you were saying, Ajahn Thitapanno, I read in Ajahn Thitapanno's book, you're saying that if you can at least identify which option is maybe like wholesome or more wholesome, then it's really like blameless. Like that's the way to go, at least as a step in a direction. If you're kind of unable to make a decision or get anywhere.
And when it's hard to actually make that distinction of when you're creating dukkha, when you're experiencing, what that dukkha is based on, it's good to have some guidelines. Mm-hmm. And in fact, that's what the Buddha says to the Kalamas. He says, when you know for yourself, that these states of mind lead to unwholesome or unwholesome results. So he is saying, yes, you have to know for yourself, and it is within you to do that. But also, as you're developing that, that ability to see that in yourself, you have some benchmarks are really helpful. And here is a list of qualities that are wholesome. Here are qualities that are unwholesome. Is what you're, acting on going to lead to this, or is it going to lead to that? So that you have some basis for directing the mind until you do know for yourself. Okay. Thank you.